with this, after having covered diagnostic part and then systemic parameters, we come to the third talk in the DME session, and that is related to DME current management. And we have Dinesh with us, who will tell us about how does he approach today DME. Dinesh?
Yeah, I'm just.
I hope there are 5-6 questions in the chat box which are related to treatment, so I did not specifically pick them up. I hope
we can answer and what we'll need to.
While Dr. Talwar is coming on the screen, I just wanted to say before we switch an agent as not responding, we have to see that the metabolic control is good.
Yeah.
Before we think that a particular drug is not working. That has been found to be useful.
You see, I do emphasize the importance of control, but I do not wait indefinitely for injecting. So sometimes I will concurrently start.
Yeah, it can be concurrent, but at least emphasized.
Yeah.
The anti-obesity drug is Saxenda.
So there should be no rush. Yeah. Yes, Dinesh.
Okay, so the current management of we finally come to the management. And for any management, the prerequisites are first assess the disease process, then assess what therapeutic armamentarium you have for that particular patient, and then formulate your strategy with keeping in mind how to maximize the outcome and optimize the cost for him. Now for Lalit was talking about CSME. Well, clinically significant macular edema was the initial way of diagnosing macular edema. Within that, now you've started having center involving macular edema. Now, important thing here is that when you have center involving macular edema, it is possible that the site of the leak from where the fluid is coming may be more than half a disc diameter from the foveal center. Keep this in mind because this affects how you will manage that patient. Unfortunately, if you don't take this into mind, keep this in mind, you say center involving macular edema, oh, it's in the center, so I have to only give anti-VEGF agents. The fact is that 50% of patients with center involving macular edema can be lasered. And if you don't do laser in the area that can be lasered, you can skew the number of injections towards more and more injections. So if you want to make your treatment cost effective, use laser judiciously, as we will discuss. Now, about the investigations, the first question was angiography, is it obsolete? Say at the initial visit, if the patient clinically seems to be having severe non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy, I would definitely do FA. It's a quick way of ruling out associated neovascularization. Now, the second group of patients is you've given the anti-VEGF therapy and your OCT response is coming, vision is not improving. Now you want to rule out what's going on. Is it ischemic maculopathy? Again, you need to do it. The third group is you decide this is persistent macular edema, is not going away. I've given 2 injections. I want to see, is it possible for me to use laser? So I want to know, are there any focal leaks there? What is the location of those focal leaks? Or is this a diffuse diabetic macular edema? These are the things which I can get from fluorescein angiography and at different times. And finally, after 3-4 months, if I want to see the adequacy of my treatment, I may do an angiography. For OCT, there is no problem. We do it for everything, assessing the thickness, macular traction, follow-up result of treatment, and any recurrence. So we do it for all the things. As we've discussed, first thing is this is a multi-pronged attack. Start with medical treatment, which means I want the LDL below 100 milligram per deciliter. I want the triglyceride and cholesterol in the mid-range of normal, and it varies with different labs, so I'm just saying mid-range of the normal. I want the HbA1c controlled at least to the level of 7, if not further lower. I want hypertension and nephropathy to be managed. And remember, when your patient has anemia, he may be having he has in fact concomitant nephropathy, which may be actually exacerbating your macular edema also. Now, there is no emergency for treatment. You say, how do you know? We know because in the RESTORE study and the DRCR, we found when if you don't give any treatment for 1 year and then give the treatment after that PRN, after 3 years, all the patients, those who started with treatment right at day 1 and those who started at 1 year, got the same final results. So there isn't any issue. But that doesn't mean you don't treat. It means you start the treatments concomitantly. The weapons we have include lasers and pharmacotherapy. And in pharmacotherapy, we have steroids, anti-VEGF drugs, and NSAIDs. From a therapeutic point of view, it is critical to see where is the leak coming in a macular edema. If it is coming further than 750 micron from foveal center, I take this figure because it's half disc diameter, very easy to remember. Then you should do focal macular laser. You will not get any negative effects of this laser if you're using 100 micron burns or 50 micron burns, more than 750 micron from the foveal center. If the leaks are less than that, within 750 microns, the treatments are anti-VEGF agents and other forms of pharmacotherapy. How do you do this laser? We laser these areas, as I said, more than 750 micron. You start them 3 to 4 weeks after you've initiated control of dyslipidemia. So first you start that control and then you give the laser. And ideally now in today's scenario, I would give one anti-VEGF agent, see it did not respond, give the second anti-VEGF agent, and 10 days later do the laser. I don't do grid laser because I believe that this has a deleterious effect on visual function, and this is proven by studies. So if you have a patient like this with multiple leaking areas, some within 750 microns, some further away, the ones which are away can be treated by laser. First give an intravitreal anti-VEGF, see the response, edema is not going away, give another anti-VEGF and give the laser 10 days later and see the response to that. For leaks which are within 750 microns of the center, you have to manage with pharmacotherapy only. I also use NSAIDs as an adjunctive role. Nepafenac I use as a preferred drug. In addition, we have VEGF inhibitors and steroids. I use subtenons even now, especially if a patient gets any increase in edema after a PRP, because that's transient and the patient feels better very quickly and that problem is taken care of. Otherwise, you can use triamcinolone or the Ozurdex implant, whether it's pseudophakic, even phakic patients with cataract, patients with a recent stroke, as long as they don't have a history of glaucoma. But the most important indication is inadequate response to anti-VEGF agents, and which you'll see is quite common. The important thing is I'm giving you the standard of care, which is steroids in the form of Ozurdex, anti-VEGF agent in the form of ranibizumab as Accentrix and aflibercept as Eylea. But you have economical alternatives like triamcinolone, Razumab as a biosimilar, Zaltrap if you want to use it, and bevacizumab. And these are all cheaper alternatives. Management is based on visual acuity. Remember, if my vision was 6/9 and N6, I am not going to take any injections regardless of what anybody tells me to. So conservative treatment, if the vision is better than 6/9 or better than N8, because there is no great advantage and you'll just end up getting 8 injections in the year. And would you deteriorate? Most of the times, no. Just to show you a patient who had such a picture, and you can see edema both on OCT and angiography, 7 years of no treatment. Patient is still 6 after his cataract surgery. If the patient has a loss of either distant or near vision, and remember we've been stressing on near vision, but none of the studies stresses on it, then, or if the patient has an effect on distant vision, you will use both as an indication for treatment, and the treatment is PRN from initiation given monthly till the vision improves to more than 6/9 and there's a normalization of the foveal contour, and then you can stop the treatment. But if you're not reaching this end point, then you continue to give the injections as long as improvement is occurring. If you find 2 consecutive injections, no improvement, and this parameter has not been reached, then try steroids. This is a lucky guy, 1 injection became all right, but most patients come out like this. Now what happens? Patient has got this picture, visions become better than 6/9, and his near vision has become better than N8. Would you repeat an injection? No, I won't. I will keep him here. But if he has not, he will only need monitoring. And if at this stage he says, I'm still improving. Last injection was given, he came to 6.9, and now he still got these, I will give one more injection and see does it improve further. But he was not improving. Last injection, this injection, same picture. No more injections are needed. Now, on the other hand, if you have a patient who was given PRN from initiation, got a normal foveal contour, but did not get better than 6.9 vision, either do an OCT angio to look for ischemic maculopathy, or look for a fluorescein angiography. But if fluorescein angiography has the added advantage, it will also tell you if there are any focal leaks which can be lasered, which an angiography, OCT angio, cannot tell you. Now, once you've started treatment, the monitoring must be continued 4 weekly, and that is the most important. As long as worsening or improving, you keep on giving treatment. If he's stable, you don't need to do any more, as I've said. Now, what can you expect? 25% of your patients will not need injections at month 3 or 4, and these patients will do very well through the year. But there will be another 20% of patients who will need monthly injections for almost 2 years. So you don't want that. What do you do when you don't have a response to 3 to 4 injections? Go to Ozurdex. If there's no change in the last 2 OCTs, last 3 OCTs, last 2 injections, go ahead and give Ozurdex to these patients. But don't repeat it more than once in 6 months. If there are focal leaks which are more than 750 micron from the foveal center, you can go ahead and laser. And if you have a recurrence, you will treat. Now, which drug to use? Only if the vision is very poor. You will. Have I run out of time? Do I need to stop?
Yeah, you have run out of time. Yeah.
Okay, so then I leave the surgical management. If you want, I'll finish. I'm finishing the medical management.
Do it, but quicker. Just do it.
Okay. So if your vision is less than 636, if the patient can afford it, aflibercept is the way to go for the first 2-3 injections. Both aflibercept and ranibizumab are equally good. Bevacizumab is not as good for drying. Now, the important thing is, I'm not repeating this. In patients who have recalcitrant macular edema, non-resolving, first rule out extenuating circumstances, which can be uncontrolled hypertension, uncontrolled diabetes, nephropathy, and ocular severe ischemia in the periphery. Look for that. The other important thing, rule out whether there is inadequate treatment. If there are leaks which are more than 750 micron away, treat them. The important thing is that in a study called for protocols U, they saw that patients who were being diagnosed as recalcitrant macular edema, if they were given 3 injections, 50% of them responded. So don't label recalcitrant till you've given adequate treatment. If you have recalcitrant, 1 injection, 2 injection, 3 injection, nothing happened. So for 4th, Ozurdex given, and suddenly improvement occurs. Now, and the patient gets a response. Now, what about surgery? Why do we do surgery? 4 or 5 slides. Basically, it's said that may remove the pro-inflammatory cytokines and pro-angiogenic factors which come into this into this pocket, which is just next to the retina, just behind the cortical vitreous. So now, what was found in patients who had, now these are not recalcitrant macular edema, but macular edema continuing, they found anti-VEGF agents, the drying was not as good, but the vision was better. And patients who had a vitrectomy, they look very good, but the vision doesn't improve as much. If you want to consider vitrectomy, look at this. If your IS-OS junction and ELM are intact, these patients can have a good prognosis. If they have this kind of picture, they are not going to improve. No, if the IS-OS junction and ELM are disruptive, they don't do well. The problem with vitrectomy is the results are variable. See, two eyes, one had 624 vision, one had 660. One improved by 1 line, the other improved by 3 lines. Now, whether this is a ceiling effect or whether it is that all of them we don't know which patient will do well. We don't know. But just to show you, this was a patient whom we operated. Now you can see this was recalcitrant macular edema, had developed a lamellar hole, multiple layers of membranes. And you can see over here, it's a very short video. We remove one layer, and then you find after you remove this one layer, because this vitreoscheisis occurs, and after you remove one layer, you find over here, you'll find another second layer coming. You see this? We start peeling off this, and the second layer comes, and you'll see it's layered with blood. Remove this, and then you find, now then after that, after we remove this, we then did an ILM peeling, and you can see during this ILM peeling, the important thing was, since it was attached on one side, I did not want to peel towards this, you can see this is in the lower side, so I wanted to peel towards it. And the important thing is here, we've done the peeling towards I think we finished it. This is repeating.
The video started again.
Yeah, it started again. So the important thing is, and then we did an ILM flap, and you can see this was a one-eyed patient who did fairly well. He had 618 vision post-op, but this is only once in a while. It doesn't happen all the time. The indications for vitrectomy, as I see today, are patients with a progressive visual deterioration with a baseline visual acuity less than 624, patients who are not responding to a combination of at least 3 consecutive monthly injections of anti-VEGF followed by 1 injection of steroids, then I would say, okay, let's go ahead for this. This is still a controversial procedure, should not be limited, should not be attempted by an occasional vitreous surgeon. And you can try it only in those who have an intact ISOS junction and ELM, not a panacea for management of DME. Improvement occurs in around half the patients, but decrease in vision was seen in 25% of patients. We need more extensive trials to determine the role. And it's, of course, some people have said, maybe we do it too late. That's why the patients don't improve. Ladies and gentlemen, with the techniques we have in our therapeutic armamentarium, with cooperation between the physician, the ophthalmologist, the retina expert, and the patient, we can form a muthi, a fist, which can help all patients to maintain vision for a long time. But the important thing is that we need patience and constant effort. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry for exceeding the time.
That we knew. So in any case, you see, I think most of the questions have been answered by Dinesh's talk, except that I will still read out a couple of questions because let me read this out because there are 2-3 questions which had come before.
Dinesh, unshare your screen.
One of the questions was whether the biomarkers.
How often, biomarkers, how often is drill associated with disruption of ISOS junction or ELM? Even Ajit Babu can take this. You see, once you see drill means inner information. So how often do you see either you don't see ELM ISOS, or how often is that disrupted for us to prognosticate?
You can have drill without ISOS junction disruption.
So question is how often, frequency.
It prevents further improvement. So the level to which you've come, that is the level to which you will not improve too much in that patient.
So Dr. Manav Setia from Gwalior wants to know, biomarkers for DME differ on OCTA and OCT. You see any biomarkers on OCTA specifically?
I think the most important is ischemic maculopathy.
Yeah.
The disruption of the foveal avascular zone. And the other thing is the disruption of the deep retinal plexus.
Deep retinal plexus, correct.
These are the 2 things which you need to look for. If the vision is not improving, and if you find that the superficial plexus looks okay, look at the deep plexus. If the deep plexus is okay, then look at the optic nerve. Then it's not a retina problem.
So Ajit, if there is a patient who has drill in the beginning, okay, you will tell him that unlikely improvement, but you will still continue to inject?
In these cases, no. You inject once, and see the response. See, always the edema will come down, and you will come to know once the edema is reduced, what is the vision. You assess at that point, it will give you fairly good idea that what is the visual potential of that patient.
No,
You see, there is another question which says that after laser photocoagulation,
this is a little more tricky. It's not so straightforward. See, if you have an area of drill and you have cystic spaces in the rest of the macula within 1000 micron, now removing the edema from those areas by giving anti-VEGF will improve the vision. It is only when you have only drill
in the
in the
center,
fovea
in the
and
center.
no cystic spaces,
Here,
then the vision will not improve.
what we need to see is that the potential in the presence of drill, wherever the areas of drill lesions are there, whether this patient has a visual potential or not.
Yeah.
So that you inject one injection at least and see the response to the injection, if the edema is coming down and how far the visual acuity is improving. In spite of edema reduction, vision is not improving. This is a clear-cut case where you should not proceed further with re-injections.
You
Yeah,
see,
so
Dinesh had pointed out one thing, that if there are patients who sometimes after laser photocoagulation, there may be increase of macular edema. And he said about Nepafinac and Subtenon. How do others manage? You see, how do others manage this issue? Suppose there is an increase of macular edema after laser photocoagulation. What do you do? Yes, Malika.
Usually, Lalit, if you see the OCT and there are cystic spaces or some amount of spongy edema, and the lesions are very close or within that 500 or 750 microns from the foveal center, laser should not be attempted at the first go. You should go for a anti-VEGF injection, and at 2 weeks time probably you do the laser so that it will not worsen the macular edema.
That is understood. That is understood.
After effect.
I'm coming back. You see, we have done the laser. We have evaluated the central 750. There is a non-center involving edema or edema originating, as Dinesh says, outside and then seeping in. Suppose Dinesh has done the laser and there is an increase of edema after that. How do you approach this? You give Nepafinac, or you give Subtenon, or you inject intravitreal anti-VEGF?
I think
That's the question. Yes, Shobhit.
I think injection is my choice.
Yeah.
I would observe for
This patient has already
before I go for injection.
suffered. He's already implicating the laser. You want fast acting drug, and and in fact, the correct approach is what Ajit already pointed out. If there is parafoveal edema or little from the center,
Yes, Malika, how do you approach this?
As Dr. Shobhit said, intravitreal anti-VEGF, and I would actually prevent it by giving NSA drops at the time of laser itself, if I've done a pan-retinal photocoagulation. So most of the time that prevents edema, and then treatment is injection. I also wanted to make a point about one of the things Dr. Talwar had made, that you can delay the injections for 1 year without any visual consequences. But you know, the DRCR.net, all the studies found that if you delay by 2 years, you don't get the same outcome. Even if then you treat monthly, you get only 4-letter gain versus 11-letter gain if you had started right in the beginning. So time is important.
Yeah. So Malika, that's the whole point. If the Rise and Rise study did not give any injections for 2 years, and they found that the baseline visual acuity, which cannot be improved to the final level, and that's where they got this thing. So the basic thing is, up to 1 year, no effect is there. More than 1 year, there is a effect. But I'm not saying wait for 1 year. I am only saying wait for 6 to 8 weeks. Start the treatment for dyslipidemia, control the blood sugar, so that you put the patient in the right mood. That look, this is also important. Otherwise, it's an injection to milligram. I'm getting the injections. What's the problem? By stressing on the need for systemic control, you put him into the frame that I have to get both the things done. That's all I'm saying. I am not saying wait for 1 year and then start treatment.
Yeah, that's what.
That we have the margin. That is for us. The margin is for us, not for the patient.
So Shobhit, Murli, in case you have patient with very good vision,
Yeah.
Very good vision. Very good vision means 6, 9 or,
Six,
10, 8.
six, six, wait.
So you want to treat or you want to wait?
I would wait. I would
Anybody in
but a
the
close follow-up. A
Close
close
follow-up.
follow-up to monitor for deterioration.
Observation.
So will anybody treat? Let's raise hands. Will anybody treat? Good
I
vision.
want, but systemic parameters, not
Yeah, yeah.
intraocular.
Systemic
Right.
parameters are taken into account.
So one of the lesson I think to be conveyed to all is, because I have seen patients being injected with all sorts of drugs. So good vision, no harm in observing. DR, unlike ARMD, is not an emergency treatment. You see, you can easily wait, and Dinesh has shown graphs also that at least for 1 year, if you control and if you start treating, if the patient reduces from say 6/9 to 6/12, you initiate treatment, no harm. I think this message should go. The other thing is about Ozurdex. Suppose the patient is fake. Dinesh, where are you looking? Suppose patient is fake. 2 injections, no response. Strategy: Ozurdex or further injections.
Frankly speaking, Lalit, I haven't seen too much progression of cataract with Ozurdex. So I would still go ahead and give the injection.
Yes, Shobhit.
Same here.
So you don't take into consideration the status of the lens.
Yeah, I want to say that I have experience of injecting almost 150 Ozurdex in phakic eyes. And it's, as Dinesh rightly told, with 1 or 2 injections, Ozurdex do not lead to any progression of cataract.
Yeah.
It is the number increases. As the number of Ozurdex injections increase, there is a progression of cataract. So any 3 or more injections, you should vary of injecting Ozurdex in those cases.
Yeah, I also do the same. I actually do not take into consideration the status. Obviously, if it is pseudophakic, the threshold for injecting Ozurdex is much less. But even in phakic, if it is 1 or 2 injections have been given and there's hardly any reduction in the OCT, or if there are too much of HRF, hyperreflective foci, I do not hesitate in a phakic patient. Malika, any comment on that?
One is that we would have tried at least the stronger anti-VEGF before you go to steroid, at least. We should not have moved from ranibizumab or bevacizumab to steroid. We should have tried aflibercept also. Because, that I would not jump from the one anti-VEGF.
I agree on this aspect. If the patient is on bevacizumab, yes, definitely we should try. But difference between ranibizumab and aflibercept is not too great for him to be subjected.
No,
but
unfortunately,
statistically speaking, if you see the graph, there is still some gap between the aflibercept line as well as the ranibizumab line. There is still some gap. I may partly agree to that. Murli, what do you say?
Can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
Okay. I do agree with you that I don't necessarily try aflibercept before trying to switch to Ozurdex. But I feel I would like to try Ozurdex even without trying to aflibercept. If the ranibizumab is not working, then I would. I don't mind if the patient can afford it. I don't mind trying aflibercept. But if the patient is not able to afford aflibercept, then probably I would go ahead with Ozurdex.
I have a little different approach here. If a patient comes to me with very poor vision baseline,
correct.
No, I'm not talking about a patient with poor vision. Yeah, I'm not talking about that group of patients.
No, Lalit, what you talked about the switch. The thing is with aflibercept, you don't have the wow factor that you in DME that you get in ARMD. The important thing is, supposing I have to switch and the patient has a history of high IOP, then I might try aflibercept before starting Ozurdex.
That's okay. That's a totally different scenario. You see, no. This scenario we are not asking.
Yeah. So
what we are asking is,
Otherwise, I would from ranibizumab I would go to Ozurdex.
Yeah.
From bevacizumab, well, I don't give bevacizumab now, so if I had been giving, I would probably have tried ranibizumab.
What about poor man's choice, which you said, triamcinolone? Do you consider irrespective of poverty?
I think this is very important if you're dealing with people who say we are dealing with very, very poor patients. Now, if you're dealing with very poor patients, you could give, 1.25 milligrams, 1 milligram of triamcinolone, and that will work as well as ranibizumab.
Correct. So this last question before we move on to Shobhit is, I think this question needs answer, is that contraindications of anti-VEGF and how to manage.
I don't think there is any problem about antiplatelet treatment. I do not stop antiplatelet treatment for any of my patients before anti-VEGF injections.
Yeah.
For me, the only contraindication to anti-VEGF is a recent MI or a recent stroke. But please keep
Can you define what is recent?
Anything with for DME, anything in less than 3 months.
3
3
months.
Remember, when your patient is getting anti-VEGF agents and he misses a follow-up, please do ask what happened. I have had patients, when you ask them what happened, they say, actually ICU mein, I was in the ICU. So, and then why were you in the ICU? I got a, heart attack. So this is one important thing. The other important thing, and this is very scary, many of these patients will come with gangrene in the leg.
Yeah.
If you have patient who has gangrene in the leg, please do not give an anti-VEGF agent.
Yeah.
He'll lose the leg.
100%, yes.
Okay. So this is the other important thing, because pair mein hota hai, no, nobody looks at the foot. You just think that he's just limping like that. So this is another category where you have to be careful.
So there was one more question. Yes, Mallika, to same question if you want to reply.
No, also the renal, if the patient is already having renal problems, it can get deteriorate very rapidly. So you have to have a clearance from the nephrologist before you inject.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Nowadays, the nephrology also is assuming importance. The other question is, are you bothered for IOP with Ozurdex?
I will do a monthly follow-up. I will watch on the prep.
No. Over a long
I
term.
use prophylactic dorzolamide.
If the patient is on more than one anti-glaucoma drug, I will not give Ozurdex.
Yeah, of
You
course.
see, that is true. That is true. You see, once the patient is on multiple drugs, obviously, if patient is glaucoma, you may not. But if the patient has been operated for TRAB, I will go ahead and give it. That you
I also subject all patients for a steroid response test with Predford drops at least for 3 to 4 weeks before I inject Ozurdex in them.
All patients.
If they are steroid responders, I don't inject.
No, that is agreeable. But do you wait for 4 or 5 weeks to evaluate?
No, at least 2 to 3 weeks. At least 3 to 4 weeks. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
I don't think that is necessary, actually, for the first, in a treatment naive patient or where who's receiving his first.
I don't know. I feel safer that way. I don't know whether everybody does
Because the
that.
dosage you are using here is very less. And pressure elevations with Ozurdex are very minimal, if at all.
Yeah.
So I'll take up one more question. One more question. One eye is having 6.6, the other eye is having 6.9.
It's symptomatic
6.9
DME.
wali aankh is symptomatic.
If the
Control of DME is very good.
If the near vision is N8 or worse, I will treat.
Yeah.
If it is N6,
If it's N6, I won't.
Symptoms
Okay.
are important.
No, if the patient is symptomatic, if the patient is feeling the difference, then I think
At
you are within your rights to treat the patient.
But at N6, 6.9, you're likely not going to get anything.
this is a hypothetical situation which is being put as a question, but
In any case, we have to address.
9 and 6 will be there and the patient will not be
You will
symptomatic.
not get anything.
Even with normal lipid profile, if the retina is studded with hard exudates, the posterior pole has plaque also and a lot of hard exudates, but lipid profile, LDL, normal. What do you do?
No, I will not give anti-lipid agents in a patient with a normal lipid profile. I will treat the macular edema as it has to
Yeah,
be.
that's okay. Anybody will give lipid agents?
I do give even with a normal lipid profile, because these patients, in addition to the ocular treatment, when you are keeping them on lipid lowering agents, the response is much better. especially in terms of.
Rajesh, your view on this lipid profile vis-a-vis the fundus picture. Suppose the fundus picture has a lot of hard exudates. All the studies have told us what Ajit also said and Dinesh also said. We all know all these things, that if it is high, obviously you will give. If it is normal, will you or will you not?
With all due consideration of the PJ publications, the other studies, fenofibrate is out of question, but I had asked physicians to start at least on atorvastatin in patients who had normal lipids, but they totally rejected it. They have categorically rejected any patients which we had sent with normal lipid levels to start. And I am not very confident or safe enough. I don't feel safe enough to start by ourselves.
No, but the converse is cardiologists, they themselves taking lipid lowering agents in spite of having normal lipid profile.
So it might be for the cardiologist, but the patient.
No. Overall, no. All diabetic patients have that risk, and it is very clearly shown in DCCT that the lipid lowering agents by themselves, irrespective of the lipid profile, has reduced the risk of progression.
So one last question before we shift to Shobhit, because this has come from Raja Narayan. He says answer is 2 injections or 3 injections before you switch to Ozurdex.
Yeah, so I need 2 injections with no change.
No change.
That means I have got, supposing the first injection, I got a little bit of change.
I think we understood that. 2 injections with no change, 3 injections if there is change occurring.
3 OCTs are identical, 2 injections, no change.
Okay, I think with this very nice discussion we had.
Lalit, one question on the panel, which I think I would like to answer from Vivek.
Please.
May I? Okay, so
please.
basically, this study saying triamcinolone is as good as laser, this all works only when they did not remove the effect of cataract.
Cataract,
Once they removed the effect of cataract, the triamcinolone was as good as anti-VEGF agents.
Protocol I, but just the protocol I here.
So I'm just saying that over here, so triamcinolone has been sort of shown as a bad drug by not removing the effect of cataract.
No, it is not a bad drug. Only thing is,
not at all a bad drug.
No, I'm saying that this question which has come is based on the fact of the study which said protocol, that it's not good enough.
No.
That good enough was because they did not remove the effect of cataract.
All of us have used IVTA for a very long time and have very, very good experience with IVTA.
Pseudophakic can be much more liberal in your.
The only issues are cataract and
IOP
and glaucoma. But even glaucoma is not there with 1 milligram. That is with 4 milligrams. The additional glaucoma described is with 4 milligram triamcinolone, not with 1 milligram. So that's the important thing.
Okay, I think we